Okay, so welcome everyone to this live stream Q&A event that's being hosted by Baw Baw Shire Council with the support from BRV and a range of state agencies who are here today. My name's Steve Ray from an organisation called the Group Work Centre, and I've been asked here today to facilitate this session as a kind of an impartial voice, enabling as many people to contribute as possible and to make sure that there's we hear answers to the very many questions that have been asked by people out in the community. In a moment, we'll be introduced to the different organisations who are here in the room, and then I'll take you through the process for the session tonight, which is scheduled for an hour and a half, ending at just after 6:30. But before we get into all of that kind of stuff, I'm going to hand it over to Mark Dupay from Baw Baw Shire Council, the Chief Executive, to officially welcome you all and to open the session. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Steve, and good evening to everybody. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the many lands on which we are meeting today. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and elders of any other communities who may be here today. Firstly, I would like to thank the following agencies for their continued efforts in supporting the community and for joining us tonight. Bushfire Recovery Victoria, Victorian Emergency Management Commissioner Andrew Crisp, Regional Roads Victoria, Department of Families, Fairness and Housing, Victorian State Emergency Services, Agriculture Victoria and the Red Cross. I also want to take a moment to thank Carmel Flynn, Kane Trist and Cassandra Elliott from BRV, who have been instrumental in putting together tonight's meeting and who have also led the cleanup and recovery for all the communities impacted by the storm and flood event. We have enjoyed working with the team and are looking forward to continuing this partnership to support the ongoing recovery efforts across our Shire. Also, thank you to the other members of Team Baw Baw that responded in those critical hours. Tonight's session would not have been possible without the tremendous efforts of Baw Baw's emergency management, infrastructure maintenance, road network, communications, and economic development teams. Thank you to each of those teams for all your hard work over the last few weeks. I'd now like to hand back to our facilitator, Steve Ray, who will then introduce the next presenters, who will provide a debrief on the storm event. Back to you, Steve.
Many thanks, Mark, and thanks for that. Yes, once again, welcome everybody. The purpose of today is really to continue this joint effort of organisations working with the community to deal with the fallout of this massive event. People's personal lives, businesses, local communities have taken a huge hit as a result of what was an almost unprecedented event. So it's vital to fully hear the details of what's happened and so the right action takes place. So all the organisations involved are welcoming both your questions and your experiences that will help ensure they're able to continue to fine-tune a really strategic response to the situation. And just I know the Red Cross is available for those needing support of all kinds, physical and emotional, etc., because it's been quite a huge event. As I mentioned, we have a number of key agencies who've been closely involved in the response and the recovery efforts, and they'll be answering these questions which we've gathered from across the Baw Baw Shire community. So the process is pretty straightforward. We're going to start with an overview from the SES to get a sense of the scale and the impact of this event. Before we hear some introductions from the key response organisations, they're going to give you a little 5 minutes of who they are, what they're doing, or what their response has been and their role, so you're aware of that. And we know who's in the room, of course, and then we'll head into the question and answers. So we're really keen to hear from those of you directly participating in this live event, of course, so we encourage you to drop your questions into the chat so that we can consider those as part of the Q&A formally. Of course, there are a lot of questions gathered already. If we don't get to some of the questions today, they will be answered through a formal response available on Council's website, and that link will be dropped into the chat as well. Just a reminder again to everyone that this session is being recorded for those who are not able to attend. Just a note to the agencies here too, just making sure that everyone, there's a bit of technical housekeeping, everyone has got their mic on mute unless you're otherwise speaking, just to enable the people who are speaking to have a bit clear air. So thank you. That's all from me for now. I'm going to hand over to the SES to kick us off with that overview. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll just share a screen if I can. So,
thanks, David.
Right. So, as we all know, that the Bureau of the BOM actually issued some predictions on the 9th and 8th and 9th of June, and the predictions were for some fairly heavy rainfall of between 60 and 100 millimetres across most of Gippsland, with some potential for rainfall totals of up to 150 to 250 mil in east and central Gippsland. So the rainfall was going to affect 19 catchments across the state in West Gippsland, and in particular the Mitchell River catchment. Then on the 9th of June, there was a severe weather warning issued by the BOM for damaging winds for West and South Gippsland and past parts of East Gippsland. So throughout the night of Wednesday the 9th, the night of the big event, and into the following morning, there's a severe weather event, damaging winds with winds gusts of up to 120 kilometres an hour. So some of those totals actually go from, once it goes above 110 kilometres an hour, become classed as destructive winds. And it was one of the few times that we've seen destructive winds in our region. So this impacted our roads and transport infrastructure by falling trees, and it actually caused a lot of landslides, which affected most of the Gippsland area. The heavy rains and some of the totals that you'll see a bit later in the presentation was effectively flash flooding. We received most of the heavy rains in over a 24-hour period, and that caused even further damage to buildings. And then we had the impacts to the communication and the power outages. SES as an agency received 9,000 RFAs, or requests for assistance, in a week, and it was the busiest period for the agency in its history.
Wow.
So the Victorian government, as a result of this severe weather event, the Victorian government declared a state of energy emergency because there was cracking caused by the weather and the Yallourn power station. There was impacts to the V-line trains between Traralgon and Bairnsdale. And there was also whilst inland we were seeing trees falling down, there was also potential for beach erosion through the high swells along the coastline. So the snapshot there is of some of the warnings and some of the incidents that had occurred that were issued through Vic Emergency. So it covered most of the Gippsland area. This slide is about the warning messages that were issued from the BOM to SES as the control agency. And as you can see, the McAllister, Thompson and Avon rivers were all in initial major flood warning by 4:30 on the Wednesday afternoon, with the Traralgon Creek and Mitchell in moderate, as you can see a bit later on. At 2 o'clock in the morning on the 10th, the Traralgon Creek had reached the major flood warning threshold. So it was quite a quick rise in flood levels, and the impacts were obviously felt across the region. So this slide just essentially is telling us the 24-hour rain totals, and it's fairly unusual for us to see the 100 and 150 to 200 mils across the Gippsland and parts of northeast. As I said before, it was really a severe weather / flash flooding event. And if you have a look at the column on the 10th, the majority of the rain fell over that 10th of June period, with the likes of Erica receiving 181 mils. But as it says down the bottom, the Warragul Gazette increased that to 204 mils. And that's only like a 1% event. So 1% chance that it's actually going to occur. And again, this is about river flows. And again, it shows just the flood class level. So the second column on the right is FLC's flood class level. So as we go down the table, you can see that there was a majority of the rivers that were in either major or moderate over that 9th, 10th period. Part of our responsibilities is to ensure that we issue warnings that are timely and relevant. And over a 6-day period, the agency issued 289 warning or advice messages to the community.
Just to let you know, David, you've got 1 minute left.
No worries. That's why I'm trying to speed through this. There was obviously we've all experienced the impacts with some stock losses. Generally, roads and residential properties were impacted. And then we received something like 1,100 requests for assistance, but it's likely to be a lot higher because a lot of people don't ring 132 500 when they're reporting storm damage. They can, and trees down, they might ring Regional Roads Victoria or the local government after hours. So in total, there was about 17,000 SES volunteer hours. And that was just a minor part because we did have a multi-agency response from all of the agencies listed there. So it was a huge effort to try and respond to the impacts. I'll stop it there, but I think we're going to make this presentation available after the event, aren't we? If people wanted it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, David. That's extraordinary, some of those statistics there, and just the intensity of it, as you said right at the beginning, that it was, did you say the most significant event that had happened in terms of the SES response?
Yeah, it was the most requests for assistance we'd actually received as an agency in a single event. So it was a huge impact and a huge response from across the state, with members coming from all across the state to support the response, as well as our partner agencies and local government.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that overview. It's really great to get that that context. And what would be great now is to hear from the agencies who are here now. You mentioned a couple of them. Maybe we could start with council, and this is your opportunity to shine for a few minutes in terms of what your agency's doing, what your organisation's done in the response so far, and any updates and important information to share with the community. So all the council people are jostling for position now and saying, who's going on?
Sure, sorry about that.
Not at all. Good on you, Christian. Thank you.
Was just trying to find the unmute button.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, so Baw Baw Shire actually experienced quite significantly. 1 second.
Background noise. It's always a thing, juggling to see who's there.
Sorry about that, just checking with the, make sure the audio is working. So we had quite a significant impact. Nothing, okay.
No, we got you. We're hearing you. We got you, Christian. I don't know.
Good. Oh, you do? Sorry, mate. I'm getting mixed reports that the audio is not working, so I'll just play ahead. Yep. So we had a pretty significant impact as a result of the severe weather event. We had 119 properties classified as damaged. Sorry, that was the wrong property, wrong one. We had a total of 627 kilometres of roads impacted. Our cleanup bill is estimated to be in the realm of $3 million particularly on council-owned roads. Our staff did 151 hours of overtime over the Queen's birthday long weekend. And that's just the emergency management team and the emergency support team. This includes our officers conducting welfare checks on affected residents. We've done 713 hours of labour and storm response from our DM Roads, our roads contractor. There's been over 1,400 hours of staff time in response from our infrastructure maintenance team. We've generated 8,000 cubic metres of mulch as green waste from cleaning up our council roads. And importantly, I'm sure RRV will be talking about this soon. There's the closure of the Mount Baw Baw Tourist Road for up to 6 months, I believe it is. There are many more specific impacts that we don't have time to mention, but I would like to acknowledge the distress that each of these cause to property owners and their communities. Significant progress has been made in response to this event, and a full report is being prepared for council outlining actions undertaken by council officers in supporting our community. I personally, along with our CEO, Mark Dupay, visited the impacted areas with Carmel and her team from BRV so they could see the storm impacts for themselves. Tonight is just one of the many recovery initiatives that Baw Baw Shire Council, in partnership with key agencies and the incident management team, has facilitated to support their community members who have been impacted by the event. The purpose of our community meeting tonight is to make things easier by bringing together all the relevant authorities in one place and provide the community with an opportunity to engage with them directly. So we're really pleased to be able to play that supporting role for our community.
Thanks so much, Christian. And wow, just the number of hours that your staff have been putting into it sounds phenomenal. That cleanup bill sounds extraordinary. So you just start to hear some of these figures and realise just how significant the event has been. All right. Who can we hear from now? Maybe you mentioned Regional Roads Victoria, but perhaps we could hear from you. Thanks, Sarah.
Absolutely, Steve. We're here. Now, it would be nice to be able to share the screen. So I'm just going to see if I can make that happen. Fingers crossed. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Have you clicked that little button down the bottom that says share screen? Yes, here we go. It's all happening.
All right, as long as that looks acceptable, I'll move through this as our update. Firstly, thank you to Council and to BRV for calling this community meeting so that we all have an opportunity to share and exchange information. You know, no storm or emergency event is a real pleasure, but I have to say what has been a pleasure is getting to know the communities of Tangel, Bren, that bit more during this event. And I would at the start like to convey my thanks to them for their patience and understanding with RRV and our works as we undertake the important restoration works along the Mount Baw Baw Tourist Road. So as I start off, this is a story best told in pictures, which is why we thought this was the best medium for conveying the story. We did have significant impacts to the arterial road network, and you'll see there 2,107 kilometres of the network were impacted. We had 169 roads closed in total, but the vast majority of those were restored within a week. And certainly when we heard, when the initial messaging came out about the emergency, we were able to mobilise our response. So we had our crews rested up in anticipation of the event coming, so that when the event arrived and we were able to safely get out there and commence works, our crews were appropriately rested and we were able to then move into a long shift of repair and remediation work. Like most agencies with roads responsibility, the greatest task for us was largely removal of fallen trees. So we're estimating, as you can see there, 1,570 kilometres of arterial roads estimated to have been impacted by fallen trees. And in some instances, they may have been one tree, but in other instances, it may have been hundreds of trees. And so a significant piece of work. And if I just move to my title screen, you'll see just that picture there on the right is actually Tara Valley Road. And I often share this story that when I was told there were 2 trees down on Tara Valley Road, not having seen this picture, I said, well, let's get those trees to move along very quickly and we get that road reopened. And then somebody sent me the picture with one of the crew members in the shot, and I could see that 2 trees wasn't exactly 2 saplings. That was actually a significant piece of work for us to do in removing those 2 trees. So perspective it sometimes is absolutely everything. If I just keep moving on, this image that you see here is actually part of the Mount Baw Baw Tourist Road there, where it connects with Link Road, and probably the site of our largest landslip and the most significant amount of damage along that road. We have had a total of 13 landslips along the Mount Baw Baw Tourist Road in various size, and I'll show some of them to you in just a moment. In terms of response and recovery, we've had crews out fairly continuously since the storm event, and we have mobilised a large workforce onto the Mount Baw Baw Tourist Road in order to try and get that repaired and reinstated as quickly as possible. A lot of these works are quite complex and have required a lot of geotechnical assessment, and certainly when we get on to the conversation around Walhalla, that is certainly part of the ongoing conversation, is the understanding of the geotechnical requirements and then being able to design a solution that can then be implemented on that site for a long-term solution, not just a quick fix solution. You can see here, this is a picture of the Traralgon-Maffra Road, probably one of our least impacted roads, but you can still see here just the force of floodwaters when it's crossing a road. It's actually lifted up the seal from the road and strewn it across the remaining layer. And that, that's work that was essentially completed in 24 hours, but still work that's required to repair some of the flood damage. So if we talk about landslips, which really was the most significant response from us, being mindful of the time, Steve, Mount Baw Baw Tourist Road, as I've said, Walhalla Road, Streslecki Highway, Lacolla Road, Turra Valley Road and Traralgon Bullock Road. Look, we've had lots of what we would call minor slumps across the network, but these were probably our most significant geotechnical challenges to resolve. If I just move into some of these, you'll see the Link Road intersection here, which is where that previous picture was from. So this was the site of our largest slip. This was essentially a couple of days after the event. You'll see that we've installed some pipes there where a new watercourse has developed, and we've actually lost a fairly large component of the road. If I move to the next picture here, you'll see that rock benching is going in order to stabilise the road surface, and you can see here where the barriers are, that we're almost getting to the top of the road where we'll be able to reinstate the remainder of the road surface that was actually washed away from the storm. Just near Link Road is this smaller slip there, smaller, but much more difficult, much more steep in terms of the terrain. And to get to the bottom of this slip to work our way up, we actually did need to come via the Link Road slip. And you can see here that this is where works really have progressed quite quickly, that the rock strengthening has moved all the way now up to the road surface. We've now installed this curb here to help channel the water, and we're just in the process of replacing the road surface here. So this is the first of our slips that we will have completed, which is a lovely thing to be able to tick off on the list. Just moving on, these are some of the other slips here along the Mount Baw Baw Tourist Road. And certainly you can see with this slip and a couple of other slips that they are very steep. And in some ways, we've got the barriers set away because we were seeing some horizontal cracking into the road on these slips. Certainly in the period immediately after the storm, there was still quite some movement through there. And so when we were having conversations with community around why they couldn't access the road and just drive slowly around the slips, it was really good to be able to have the conversation around the importance of making sure that we've got a stable geotechnical site there, and to be able to explain that we were still experiencing some movement as water was continuing to come down the mountain. Again, this is another piece of repair work on the Mount Baw Baw Tourist Road, again, nearly completed, one of our slip sites. And you'll see that, again, the rock stabilisation work has come up to the road surface. This would be one of what we described as a very minor slump on the Mount Baw Baw Tourist Road. And the teams were actually able to get these slumps and all this material removed off the road within about 5 days of the storm event itself. If we just take a quick look at the Traralgon Bullock Road, so this is the works commencing on that road, and I think sometimes perspective again is really, it doesn't look that steep until you go to the bottom of the slip, and then you can see the amount of rock and geotechnical fabric and material that's need to be brought in to stabilise some of these areas. We had some minor slumps on Lacolla Road as well. We actually had quite a large slip on the Strzelecki Highway. So this is it when we've done the dig down work, and this is it now fully restored. If we get to Walhalla, you'll see that again, we had some slips down onto the road, some material that the crews were able to mobilise and remove in order to be able to open that road. And the road was open with some barriers around one of the slips closer to the town, which I'll get to in just a second, but you can see that we still have some work to do here along Stringers Creek in terms of reinstating the road, and we're just moving through a process at the moment of trying to finalise what the geotechnical design or the reinstatement design might look like for this particular area. Again, thank you, Steve. Again, Walhalla Road. And so I just wanted to show that this is the road that moves into Walhalla, where we did have the land slip. And so the crew have now completed that restoration work. So that's been fantastic to be able to get that fully restored and back to operating order. And then just quickly, inspections of the bridge. So I'll leave it there, Steve. But again, I just wanted to extend my thanks to community members for their patience and understanding, and certainly what's been really important in terms of being able to deliver good solutions to these storm works has been the intel that has been coming forth from the community in terms of how they use the road, the way the type of traffic, particularly busy periods of time, hours in which things might be busier, and certainly the opportunity to support some of the accommodation providers in and around the Tangel Brent and the Mount Baw Baw area. So thank you very much, Steve, for the time tonight.
Good on you. Thanks for that. Some fascinating shots of those landslips. Good to see those tourist roads getting reinstated too. Obviously, there's so many dimensions of the impact of this on personal communities and business community as well. So thank you for that. I just wanted to also acknowledge that Andrew Crisp is here, who is the Emergency Management Commissioner, has joined this conversation. So welcome. It's great to have you here, as well as Carmel from BRV, the Chief Executive. So we've got some good people here who are able to help answer some of these questions as we get into those questions later on. Just a couple more agencies to hear from. I think we've got, who would like to jump in? I think the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing. Can we hear from you?
Thanks, Steve. Hi all, I'm Rod Forrer from Department of Families, Fairness and Housing. I'm managing the social recovery for Gippsland. Part of our role is in social recovery, working with all of the local government areas right across Gippsland, including East Gippsland, because we're still working with the bushfire recovery as well, but obviously with the focus on the recovery in relation to the recent storm events. We're working with all of the other councils down from Wellington down to Bass Coast, Baw Baw, South Gippsland and Latrobe. Our focus is really on social recovery and psychosocial recovery, so really mental health and wellbeing, and that can lead into potentially accommodation assistance and links into other health-related activity. Really, it's been a strong partnership with Bushfire Recovery Victoria, both for the fires and also for this event, and also local government and the other agencies that are funded. So the department currently contract manages recovery support funding through a number of agencies, including Windermere, Latrobe Community Health Service, Latrobe City, Rumyuck and Uniting. And that is really to provide assistance with the social recovery workers that will be on the ground to assist. So what has been set up is, and hopefully people are aware of this, but there is a storm and flood recovery hotline that we can share with this group, 1-800-560-760. And that's to enable people to receive assistance for registering for clean-up of structures on private property, accessing recovery support worker. They were the funded support workers that I referred to.
Are you able to put that in the support? Are you able to put that in the chat?
Certainly will.
Yeah, good on you.
And financial counselling and information for payments and grants that might be available as well. So I just want to stress that that 1-800 number is the intake and assessment part, if you like, that we're encouraging people to utilise so that we can link people in with other supports that may be required. The other part of what our department does is immediately after the event is manage the personal hardship assistance. And so that is, that's resulted in nearly 300 relief applications for people that have been displaced, and also for about 100 assessments for re-establishment payments, which are where people have lost a significant amount of property in their house, be it contents or actual damage to the structure, particularly where people are disadvantaged and requiring additional supports. So again, that's something that kicks in after any event, and certainly something the department manages immediately. Also coordinating the group that are part of this discussion. So the social recovery group meetings are with the councils and the agencies to talk about activities, opportunities, what's working well, where there might still be gaps, where we may be able to help coordinate further assistance as required. And we'll utilise that group to track the demand and to adapt to the needs as well. So I'll share that information in this chat now, but that's it in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Rod. Terrific. And finally, from the Red Cross, have we got the Red Cross here? A representative. Thanks, Cheryl. Be great to hear from you. You're just on mute. That wonderful thing that we've all been experiencing at one time or another.
Hi, thanks for the invitation to join the event.
Good on you.
Red Cross were immediately on the ground on the Thursday morning. We managed to gather 12 of our team together to go out in the by early afternoon after they'd been briefed. And we were knocking on doors, and we knocked on doors in Traralgon, Yanard, all that area down there, probably for about 10 to 12 days. Some people we went back twice, 3 times because they were not coping very well. In knocking on doors, we would ask how they were going. We would hand out some of our support booklets, such as cleaning up after an emergency, which is that one. Oh dear. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And to give them information. The other thing that we did was that we linked them with, we took forms with us how to claim for hardship payments. Sometimes we helped people to fill them out if they were elderly and couldn't manage that and didn't have anyone else to help them. And generally the community were fantastic. They really welcomed us and really appreciated us calling on them. We also went further afield, and we went to Lilydale area where it was Dandenong, and quite a few of our people went there, where we went out with the army. We went out with health officers to check on places while the health officer was checking the sewage and things like that. We were talking to the homeowner and offering personal support. And we also have attended, or I've lost count how many community meetings that we have attended, to pass on to our head office the community sentiment, to gauge how the community is coping, and this gets passed on to government officers as well. So quite a big event for us in Latrobe, emergency services. Yes, so that's about roughly a snapshot of what we've done.
Wow.
And we'll be heading in now to doing some preparedness work to help people to prepare for such an event like this as we approach summer.
Yeah, wow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, we often think immediately of, you know, those physical infrastructure things, trees falling across houses, roads, whatever. And of course, all, you know, dealing with those things is so critical. But that personal connection that you're talking about, people just knowing that there's someone there, that's such a great role that, you know, you're fulfilling within Red Cross and of course DFFH as well, these personal dimensions to all this. So it's so encouraging to hear how this support is right across the board for these communities. Thank you very much, Cheryl. Is there anyone else who'd like to jump in there? Carmel, I see you're there. I know there'll be probably questions that you'll be able to answer, but would you like to take a moment?
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Love to jump in, and if Andrew is around, I'm sure he would also like to say a few words, because essentially the role of Bushfire Recovery Victoria is undertaken by delegation, legal delegation from our Commissioner of Emergency Management, Andrew Crisp, to me as Acting CEO of Bushfire Recovery Victoria. So just to take a moment to start with the obvious question, who is Bushfire Recovery Victoria and what are we doing in a storms and flood event? Just very quickly, BRV, I'll call us from now on, was set up after the 2019-20 fires to work directly with communities and councils who were affected by the fires to make sure they had a dedicated state agency who could lead and coordinate recovery across other regional and state agencies. And then following the storm event of the 9th of June, it was such a significant event that government then asked BRV to also step up and be that dedicated recovery agency for those communities and councils affected by the storm and floods. And so we do that under a delegation from Andrew to myself, and Andrew and I work really closely together to understand how that's going. So Baw Baw Shire Council leads recovery at the local level, and Mark and his very capable team, and I'm in awe of you, are the community's first port of call. But because this is so significant, Baw Baw will need often to navigate into state government agencies, and there might be multiple agencies that they may need to request support of, and even through to the Commonwealth Government. And so we're sort of the port of call, the navigator into state government and then into Commonwealth Government to help Baw Baw Shire Council achieve the best outcomes for communities of Baw Baw. So today, as Mark indicated at the beginning of the meeting, BRV's been working really closely with the council and with other agencies. We really want to listen to and understand the needs of communities. As Rod said so well, we've set up a hotline. It's the same number that Rod mentioned, and that hotline is available for communities to understand what supports are available to them, and it also can lead them to support in regards to clean up of their private properties. And that's the other role that BRV is playing, is we've engaged a lead contractor, John Ling's group, to lead a state coordinated cleanup of private properties who were affected by the storms and flood events, and people can access that by ringing that 1-800-560-760 number. So in a snapshot, that's what we're doing, and maybe if Andrew is on board, he might want to add a few words.
Thanks, Carmel. Yes, Andrew, if you're there, it'd be fabulous to hear from you.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks very much, Steve. And it will just be a few words because, as I often say, it's important for me and for all of us to actually listen to what the community have to say and what questions they have, because the important thing for all of us is about, and I acknowledge the speakers already in talking about the work done in respective areas and the ongoing work with Carmel and her incredible team. Have done a great job, but it's always about what more can we do, what more can we do. So I guess just a point in relation to that, and there is actually there is a formalised piece of work that we're undertaking now. So we're calling it a coordinated learning framework, whereas you'd imagine, and we should be conducting after action reviews and debriefs into many aspects in relation to this particular event. So whether that's a specific piece in relation to energy, telecommunications, public information and warning. So we're pulling all that work together now. And that's one of the important reasons why I want to come along and listen firsthand to what community have to say to ensure that we're feeding that into those particular processes, as I said, so we get better for the future. The thing I guess is interesting for me, I've actually just come off another community meeting with residents of 33 Alfred Street public housing towers So some might remember that was a significant event last year during COVID, and similarly they've got some COVID cases in that tower at the moment. So it is this piece about whatever we do now, it's just being conscious. And I think Cheryl touched on when she talked about and she won't say it, but the great work of Red Cross. There are other challenges for us in the state, and there will be other challenges. We're moving into this high risk weather season, so it is really important that we stay as coordinated as we are, where we might have to manage concurrent and compounding emergencies. So, but in saying all of that, it is very much about now listening to the community and what your feedback is, and again, what more we can do better to support you in the future. Thanks for the opportunity, Steve.
Thanks so much. Great to hear from you, Andrew, and great to get that context too from both of you, because that bigger picture, understanding of how to tackle this whole thing strategically is obviously, a balancing act where you've got to do immediate response and recovery, but then there are big issues about, not wanting to do these piecemeal things as part of that recovery, which we've heard from the community as well. So it's a huge responsibility. Thanks, everyone. We're going to move now to the Q&As, and there are some questions that have been gathered. So we're going to then go to our Brains Trust, who are here to hear from them and see if we can get some answers to some of these questions. I'm going to start with BRV. The question that's come in is, well, it was gathered earlier, and we'll go to any that come in through this live stream later. What support is available for people who are affected by the storms? So I guess, Carmel, it's over to you.
Yeah, look, just quickly, there are a range of supports, and the primary sort of major piece of support is the statewide cleanup program that BRV is leading with the Johns Lyng Group, but there are also other supports available to community members, and so we encourage the calling of that phone number, 1-800-560-760 of community members, so they can articulate they can talk about their circumstances and what they need if they're not getting what they need. And then there are dedicated recovery workers who can help steer them with what's available for them.
Fantastic. And yes, that number is there in the chat for people if you want to have a look at that. So I'm just going to go straight to another one, which is BRV related, which is goes to this question of the creek in Walhalla, which has got so many different agencies with tenure over the whole site. And the question is, who's fixing the entire creek through Walhalla? So I guess the question there is about coordination. So yeah, who'd like to tackle that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to that too. Thanks, Steve. And look, this was a question that we heard loud and clear at a community meeting that was held at Walhalla, maybe 2 weeks ago now. And we understand that there's a long history of that community wanting to have the creek fixed and seeing the complexity that exists because of the multiple 10 years ownership along that creek. So BRV, we put our hand up. We said, well, our job is here to coordinate state agencies to fix what we call wicked problems. And so our regional director, Kane Trist, who's on the line today, is looking to scope and understand the works that will be required. We'll also be looking into the previous work that's been done by the community and by key stakeholders. We'll be working closely with council and the range of state agencies that are involved in Walhalla. And but we will be the one agency that will be doing the overarching coordination of all of the others. Kane, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Thanks, Carmel, and evening, everyone. Nice to join you. Yeah, look, we are trying to get a schedule and really also making sure that from one end of the creek to the other, with all the works going on with the different land management agencies and owners, that we don't miss anything either. But the other thing for me is we want to do it with minimal disruption in the fastest time possible. So, you know, to give an example, we don't want one agency closing the road to do works and then the next day another agency's closing the road to do works, because that would impact tourism and our residents. So we'll try and get that a bit more coordinated and the site agencies in a COVID safe manner later this week, just to walk the creek and work out who's doing what and when. So we should be able to share that with people down the track.
Thanks very much for that, Kane and Carmel. And I think there'll be a great sigh of relief for people to hear that BRV's in there as this kind of, you know, glue between all these different agencies when there are these things which cover so many different, you know, areas. And a creek doesn't know about the different agencies involved on its one land. Let's go to some questions for council. And the first question is about what council and state government are doing to help the areas impacted by flood. Anybody
Sure.
from council? Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. I'll chime in there. We've had people on the ground from very early on in the piece, contacting residents who have been impacted, making phone calls, going out and visiting their properties, assessing impacts, and making sure that we can link them into those various state agencies, especially the State Recovery Program, DFFH, things like that. So that we've been active from the very beginning there.
Fantastic. Moving on from that, there's some specific questions there about in Walhalla again, where the impact of some of the timber coming down, the trees, the fallen trees coming down into the creek and bumping up against the bridges. One of the questions here is about who's going to assess the bridges over the creek in Walhalla, I guess, for safety and so on.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're referring to the private bridges that run along the creek, run across the creek onto the public road.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
So yeah, we've actually organised an engineer to go out and do some private assessments of those private bridges and check out, see if they're all safe, need repairs. We're going to be providing copies of those reports to the landowners so they have that information available to see if their bridge requires any specific repairs. There is a bridge that's across to the North Gardens. That goes across to the North Gardens campground. That is currently open to pedestrians right now, but still needs a little bit of checking and probably some work to stabilise it for vehicles.
Fantastic, thank you for that. There's a couple of questions here that relate to, you know, I guess the whole tourist element here and the travelling public. One is because Walhalla is a tourist destination, the question is around unauthorised camping and how unauthorised camping, campfires, etc., going to be policed with no campgrounds currently open in Walhalla.
Yeah, that's right. And we've got a local law that's just been gazetted. So at the moment, we're working with our infrastructure maintenance team is working with our compliance team to put together some signage that'll be advising people where they can and can't camp within Walhalla. We'll then be working with BRV to potentially look at erecting some of that signage in the interim, before we've finalised what the final signage looks like. And our compliance officers, local laws, will respond to any complaints of unauthorised camping and especially campfires as well during business hours, and we'll schedule patrols outside of business hours as required.
Fantastic, thank you for that. I might come back to you in a moment. I'm going to ask Sarah perhaps to answer this question, which is about what's happening with tourists travelling to flood and storm affected areas during upcoming holiday periods and weekends. We saw lots of the roads are being fixed very quickly. Is there any, or what is the strategy there, I guess, Sarah?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So certainly where roads are currently open, and we might have some temporary barricades for notification to let people know that they need to move around those. So that would be Walhalla. But mostly across the arterial road network, all of the roads are open with the exception of the Mount Baw Baw Tourist Road. And certainly we have been working with the Mount Baw Baw Resort to make sure that there is an opportunity for people to get to the resort. So people will know that the South Face Road has been available for people to make that access. And people have also been able to get to Tangel Bren via a Delp Road. And then we have been providing a vehicle piloting service between Tangel Bren and the ski resort so people can complete that last little vital link of their trip to Tangel Bren. So where we do have issues, what has been really important for us as an approach is actually to, for the instance of Tangel Bren, we brought the accommodation providers together. We asked them what they thought would be a really workable solution for them, and if we could support them, then we would. And certainly it's been a great opportunity for us to have some very community led solutions to some of those problems. So you know, I think that's certainly been the approach of many of the agencies in terms of dealing with some of those trickier issues.
Thank you. I think this is an opportunity to have another go at something you mentioned in your presentation, but it's a specific question about, are trees being cleared off roads? So maybe you could just directly now answer that, given that you have mentioned it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the initial scope of works in terms of, you know, immediately after the storm, between storm and restoration work, certainly there were trees that were cut up, and often they will be cut to make a path for emergency access vehicles, and then the crews will come back through and we will clear those trees where we have pushed them just to the very edge of the road. Where there is timber that has fallen beyond the road, so well beyond the road, the maintenance envelope, and, you know, across into some of those forested areas, generally in large areas of you know, open public land where the trees have fallen, they will remain there, and we will deal predominantly with those that remain within the maintenance envelope of the road.
Fantastic, thank you. That's very helpful. Actually, I think there was a question here about, was there a question there that came in through the live stream? Maybe someone can answer this, that related to that picture that Sarah showed with those two big trees. Was that a specific question about who's moving those trees?
My understanding, Steve, is that was a question from the Walhalla community meeting. So,
right.
So my understanding is that those trees fell and in some ways caused that landslip to occur. And so obviously when the landslip's been reinstated, the trees are there and have been sort of moved to the side. So we're just negotiating at the moment the potential opportunity to remove those trees in the not too distant future.
They are such massive trees. It's such a tragedy, isn't it? I mean, apart from obviously the impact that they cause from falling over, but you look at those trees and you think, wow, that is some event that can uproot trees of that size. It's just phenomenal. All right, what other questions have we got here? Just anybody who's not on mute, who is wondering if they are on mute, just double check there. I'm going to go back to council because there's a couple more questions here, and anybody who would like to answer these. There's a specific question about the road north of the Walhalla reopen, north of the Walhalla reopen, when that might actually happen. Sorry, the road north of Walhalla, when is that going to reopen?
Yeah, sure. The road north of Walhalla up to Aberfeldy. It's currently being repaired now, and it should be reopened in the next week or two if it hasn't been sort of already, according to my notes that I have here.
Okay, thanks for that, Christian. Couple of questions too here that kind of relate to the business side of things in terms of the impact that this has had on people. One is, you know, obviously there's the repair works, and the question here is what plan there is to help the communities recover economically, and I'm assuming that's to do with, you know, whether there are support from state government or grants or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a really great question, and it's really important for us to be able to get a whole picture, a holistic view of what the community is needing in terms of recovery, especially when we know in some of our areas it's been compounded by bushfires in 2019 and even further back from there. We've also got COVID on top of that. So in order to give us that, to help us form that holistic view and work through all the different ideas and suggestions there could be, it'd be really great for communities to be able to come together, form some community recovery committees or action groups, things like that, where they can identify some of those priorities. Because we really want to have a community-led recovery. I think Sarah touched on this earlier on, and that's a really important thing, because if it's not generated and led by a community, it's going to be something that's going to be very challenging to make sure all voices are heard and the best projects are identified and advocated for. Additionally, Council has received funding from the state government to engage dedicated resource to work specifically with our businesses and local tourist groups to deliver events and projects to support tourism in consultation with community groups and those business communities. We're advertising for that right now. Once that's been filled and appointed, that person will start contacting individual businesses, start working with local community groups, and start identifying, I suppose, mapping out a pathway forward in community recovery.
Thanks, Christian. So it sounds like you've got a two-way process. You're looking for the community to be proactive so that you're supporting the right kind of projects that are relevant to their needs, not just going in and providing, scattergun approach to funding. But you've also got did you say you've got state government funding as well?
Yeah, so there's been some funding provided that's to specifically target the business and tourism side of the equation. And we really want to work with community groups and local businesses and other organisations to help us identify what the best pathway forward is in recovery, because it's one of those things the community knows themselves best. And if if government come in and just start funding things without taking their views into consideration, we won't actually get the best result.
Yeah, fantastic. Cheryl, I'm not sure if you're still there. You mentioned before just what a great job the Red Cross was doing in terms of supporting people immediately after the event. There's a question here you might be able to help support an answer to, and that is basically, what is the support available for mental health and well-being? And maybe you too, Rod, can give a little bit more specific direction to that question, like what's there for people?
We have people who perhaps need ongoing support. We have a telephone service that people can call, and you can access that with our number, which is 1-800-2. I'll put it in the chat. 1-800-232-929. I think I've got it here somewhere, but anyway, it's gone at the moment. But yeah, so, and we have a number of booklets that offer really good sound advice, been written by psychologists for people who are not coping down the track, because it is a major event in people's lives and it's very disruptive for months, even years. So Red Cross are used to handling that sort of thing.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to break us up now. We've got some more updates from agencies, I believe. I'm hoping they're there. So we can hear a little bit more about some of the agencies, because there's such a lot of response from the organisations that have been all kind of coming together to support here. So I'm wondering if we've got AgVic able to provide us with any support.
Yep, I'm here, yep. Steve. Good to see you again.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to just talk about AgVic's activities anyway. So following the storm event on the 9th and 10th of June, Agriculture Victoria contacted 4,200 primary producers, and that was done either by phone, SMS, mail, or through door knocking. Of those 4,200, we ended up with about 600 people that indicated that they'd been impacted by the storm and flood. That was over 34 local government areas. Now, the interesting thing is we're talking about the farming community there who are pretty resilient. I reckon there was probably a lot more than 600 that actually were impacted, but, some people just get on with it. Others obviously were really badly affected. Of those 4,200, we now have a case list of about 330 who we class as recovery cases, and we're working with them fairly closely to try and assist them through. In Baw Baw, there's probably only 9 or 10 on that recovery list, but originally we contacted about 280 producers. Some of the key impacts that we saw or indicated by primary producers included soil erosion issues, and Sarah's already talked about landslips. We've actually had landslips extensively across the region, and we're dealing with some quite big landslips in the Baw Baw region, but mainly in Latrobe. Latrobe's been really impacted. If you looked at those original rainfall data records that were provided by David from SES, you can understand why. So we've got soil erosion issues, stream bank issues, farm tracks and bridges knocked out as well, and a hell of a lot of pasture damage amounting to something like 10,000 hectares. The animal health issues as well, damage to horticultural crops and facilities, and also damage to infrastructure caused by tree fall, which was a fairly major event, not just in Baw Baw, but across most of the 34 LGAs.
What kind of infrastructure are we talking about? Yeah.
Sheds, fences, fortunately in a farming sense, not too many houses, okay, but mainly sheds and fences. But if you think about fence damage, that was extensive. We do have a kilometre, you know, how many kilometres were affected, and it was, you know, up around 400 kilometres, I think. So the fortunate thing is we didn't have the stock losses that we had during the fires, but there were still people who were impacted. And I just call out to people to be aware that animals may still be suffering from some issues, especially if they were in flood affected areas. So keep a good eye on them anyway. So from an AgVic point of view, we've got this team together at the moment, a recovery team, and we're able to assist primary producers with a whole range of technical advice in a range of areas, including pasture recovery, grazing management, soil erosion management, animal health, whole farm planning, water quality, and farm business planning. So there's a whole range of things that we can assist with there. We've actually been running some on-farm events, some pasture workshops and a few other things, but unfortunately with the latest COVID restrictions, that's a little bit difficult. So we will continue to run a whole series of online webinars, which you can actually look up on our website. So the other thing that's been important to us is that, you know, we're also been signposting producers to what else is available out there, and certainly BlazeAid has played a great role in assisting farmers. The Gippsland Emergency Relief Fund has been absolutely fantastic, not just with farmers, but with residential owners across the region as well. And they've put out over $800,000 in funding to support affected communities. So obviously Small Business Victoria, Rural Financial Counselling Service, BRV, the Shires and Red Cross have been really important part of that. So it's been a delight for us in a way that we've actually been able to form this sort of community amongst ourselves, and we have been able to signpost and, you know, put place in order ways and means in which primary producers can get further support. So that's probably about it from me, Steve, unless anyone's got questions.
Thank you, Nick. That's fantastic. And again, you know, just to hear a whole other dimension of the community that's been so affected by this, and a fence coming down with a tree across it that's massive. And I saw some of those myself up in Trentham, thinking, what do they do about that? You know, it's an extraordinary thing to try and think of how you deal with those things immediately. So thanks again, Nick. Just wondering if we still have SBV here. They were there at the beginning, but it looks like they may not be there anymore. Small Business Victoria. Not there, but who else have we got? Let's see. We could hear from BRV. There's one we haven't heard from specifically. We've heard answers to questions, but maybe if you want to say a bit more, Carmel, or Delp. I don't know if there's a rep from Delp here. Oh, Carmel, you're on mute. Yeah.
Apologies. Thank you. I think I did give a bit of a snapshot at the beginning.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, about what we were doing, etc. I did notice, I think there's a question that's come through the chat from Michael Lee.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
Yes. So I just wanted to say at the outset, Michael, happy to meet with you at any time to discuss the needs of the Walhalla community. And I think what the essence of your question is going to the importance of recovery, providing the means and the resources for communities to come together, whether that's at events or whether that's events, in inverted commas, or whether that's through other means such as community recovery committees. And absolutely, that is a mechanism which BRV completely supports, and we will do so as part of the recovery from storms and floods. Our emphasis and our focus to date has been really on cleanup, getting some of that sort of physical stuff done, but we know that what will work best for communities is if they are provided the opportunity to connect and to come together, and that there ought to be resources behind that. So yeah, that's absolutely on our agenda. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Carmel. Have you got any other questions there that have, let me just go back to the question and answers. If there are any other questions that have come in through the live stream, please let me know about those. There's one here that is a kind of an open question that came from Diane Johnson, which was work on the Nuji River Reserve, which I believe was pretty well, destroyed by the flooding. And the question is, when will work on the Nuji River Reserve area for visitors and locals happen for it to be used again? There's barbecue and picnic tables. They're right on the river. Anybody, maybe council or BRV?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there, Steve.
Thanks.
So my understanding is it's being identified and looked at by our infrastructure teams. They'll be scheduling it and programming it for work. I don't have an exact date to hand with me right now, but we'll get that information and make sure the community is aware of that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm wondering if anybody from council would like to talk about the small business mentoring services on behalf of Small Business Victoria, who are no longer here. Has anybody got their a portfolio around that?
I see Carmel's keyed up. I'll let her go.
Yeah.
All I will say is that I know it's available and RDB's supporting that, and if people want to reach out, they can do so through that hotline, 1800 560 760, and we'll be able to put them in contact with that support.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Carmel. Let me see, there's a couple more questions there that we could answer, or we could hopefully get answers from. This is actually one, I think we've lost AgVic, have we? There was one question there that I didn't ask while he was.
I'm still here, Steve.
Oh, you're there. Good on you, Nick. The question is, what support is available for producers who were impacted by the storms?
Yeah, look, there's a whole range of support available. If they need to, probably the best bet is they go to the Gippsland Emergency Relief Fund site to get more detail there. And specifically, what are they particularly after? Because they could get assistance from Blaze Aid if they've got fencing that needs to be, re-erected or whatever. From an AgVic point of view, we're providing technical support on the ground when we can get out there, and certainly via telephone, video, or whatever in the meantime anyway, where we can actually drag experts from across the state to assist with particular problems. So there's technical support available. Really depends on what the issue is, but if they're a primary producer, we'll triage it and we'll point them in the right direction.
Good on you, Nick. Thank you very much for that. I'm fascinated by, well, in a way, it makes complete sense, but you just mentioned funding from Blaze Aid there. I mean, so many of our disasters in the past have been bushfire focused, and it's interesting that we've got funds swinging around into this kind of thing, and we've got BRV obviously involved in this, huge storm and flooding event. So good to see those resources going where they need to. Look, it looks like that's most of our questions covered. And please, anybody shout out, let me know if there are more questions there. But I wanted to, and even while we're looking for that, wanted to just give some opportunity perhaps to both council and BRV to talk more strategically about something that was mentioned in terms of the economic recovery and how that could be, best dealt with. And I think there has been talk about the community-led need for that recovery. Does anybody want to speak to that and what that might look like so that the community can get a sense of that? Everyone's poised. It could be you, Christian. It could be you, Kane. It could be you, Carmel. Anybody like to jump in on that?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to jump in there, Steve, and speak to it just very broadly. Look, it's really just about government and council engaging with our local community, finding out from them what their priorities are, so we can facilitate a program of works that's going to be directly relevant and applicable for the community, not something that they don't want to see happen. So that's what's so important, that community can get a chance to talk about what's important to them, so that the work can actually be directly relevant.
Okay, so maybe we could hear a bit more about this structure, the CRC, which I've heard a bit about. Kane, can you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I mean, first and foremost, we'll be led by community and what community wants to do in relation to how they want to be engaged, both in the short term and also the longer term as part of their recovery. It's been interesting. We had the Walhalla meeting a couple of weeks ago. We did hear a lot of feedback that we didn't think there was a need for a CRC, and that's perfectly fine. We're happy to work with as many groups or individuals as we need, but we've also had people after that meeting from Walhalla come to both council and BRV requesting a community recovery committee. So we'll resolve that with community in the next short little while. I think the key thing though that people want to see is works commence. So we're moving as fast as possible to get that coordinated. What I will say is those works will make safe and repair, and anything sort of longer term around economic benefit and the like, we will need to engage with community about those bigger projects. And that's the longer term piece that we need to work with everyone on.
Thanks.
I don't know if you wanted to add any more to that, Carmel.
No, spot on. I just would like to assure everyone that, at the state level, we have DJPR, which is the lead state government agency around economic recovery, at the table. We know that they've been under their ministers rolling out supports to businesses because of the COVID restrictions and the COVID lockdowns, and they've not been insignificant supports. But we all know the hardships that businesses and the economy are suffering because of multiple cascading emergencies, including COVID, as well as the floods, and before that, bushfires. So it is absolutely top of mind as one of the one of the critical foundational supports that communities need is this business and economic support, and that is absolutely on the agenda in terms of priorities.
Thanks, Carmel. I'm wondering, maybe there's people out in the community who are quite active, and they're active in their own particular organisation and traditionally have worked through those organisations, whether they be, a heritage group or some kind of tourist group, who may not have heard of CRCs and what precedents there are around these kind of structures, and I guess in particular what their status is and how they're viewed by governments who would fund them. Can you say something to that, perhaps, Kane? Or Carmel? Anyone who knows anything. It's good. Or you just unmute again, Carmel. Something amazing is happening.
I know, sorry, I just having a few technical difficulties. Look, the main point I'd like to make about that is that CRCs are not a funding mechanism. That's not the main reason for them to exist. The main reason for community recovery committees is if communities wish to advocate together for how they prioritise for their communities through to local, state and Commonwealth governments. This can be one way where they come together and say, we've consulted with each other, but also as well, it can be a mechanism, firstly and foremostly as a social connection between communities to say this has been our experience and we want to share that experience with each other. And as part of that, also look at what will help us as a community recover. And then as part of that, kind of advocate through to local and state government as to helping us get what we need for us to recover as quickly and as effectively as possible. So they're not a funding mechanism per se, but we find that they're often a great way for communities to own what they need, and for government in turn to listen and to fund the right things for communities in terms of what they need. So that's sort of one of the great benefits of community recovery committees. If people want to find out more, I just would suggest they go in firstly, hopefully Christian's fine by this, via the, local government, and Christian, there he is, and he can absolutely take those inquiries and work with us to again facilitate some informal or meetings or more formal meetings, whatever it works for communities, just to talk about it a bit more and throw some ideas around about what works best for different communities.
Thanks, Carmel. And thank you for that helpful overview of the CRC. It makes a lot of sense in terms of, you can have a lot of different organisations out within one community, some of them very single interest, but if they've got a CRC, it sounds like then you're pulling a whole lot or bringing together a whole lot of different perspectives, and you've got a broader view, and that makes sense then that they're advocating in a kind of more strategic way. So thanks for that. That's very helpful. Hopefully it's helpful to others too. I'm just looking here, there's a question from Michael, which was a question about the list of questions sent in prior to this meeting, and maybe council or council rep could speak to that. Did you want to talk to that, Christian, at all?
Yeah, sure, no problems at all, Steve. Yep. Thanks. So we're collating the list of questions that have been sent in. What we're working on doing is basically documenting our responses both from council and from all the other agencies working together, just to make sure we give the most accurate information, and we'll be publishing that as soon as we can. It'll be publicly available to all.
Okay, thank you. So that'll be on the council website and sent out via various channels. Is that the plan?
Yep, that's the plan.
Okay, thank you. I just want to draw people's attention to the chat. There's quite a lot of rich material in that. If you're in the live stream, there's numbers and websites and so on. So please make sure that you have a good look at that. We're getting close to the end now, and I'm just wondering if there's any final comments from anybody, or any final questions that may come in through the live stream. If you've been absolutely busting to ask a question, here's your chance. Otherwise, maybe Christian, could you share, or someone from council, if you could share council's website there, because I just did mention it in terms of that document, that would be terrific.
Yep, we'll do that, Steve.
Good on you, thank you. And just big thanks to all the agencies who've come along here today and for your input. And I think it's a real boost to people's confidence that this is being handled from so many different angles, and it's great to see that there's all this communication happening. Obviously, well, it must be great for people to know that there is a coordinated response, notwithstanding the challenges where there are lots of different intersect points where people's responsibilities comes into a bit of a grey area. So it's good to have BRV in there kind of managing some of that grey area stuff. Thank you all for giving up some of your time. Thank you for your questions. If you put them in, please continue to look out on council's website for further information and updates. you've got connections to a whole range of different organisations. If you've got specific needs, whether they be, as Rod mentioned before, you know, emotional, psychosocial needs, the Red Cross from Cheryl, right through to all of the infrastructure needs that you might have. So please tap in where you need to, so that if you need support, please reach out, because there are people there willing to you know, have a conversation with you. Sometimes that's all it is. It's a need for a conversation, particularly if you've been kind of trying to work through all of the huge challenges. We had a couple of meetings that were up in the Shire of Upper Shire of Yarra Ranges, and a couple of people came along there, and they suddenly realised this was the first opportunity they had to actually share their story. So, you know, just having that opportunity, and as Cheryl mentioned, when people have that opportunity to share their story, they know they've got support there. That can be such a critical starting point for you all. So it's a huge event. It's a lot to have to deal with, and good luck in the ongoing journey of doing that. And thank you all again for being here, and we'll see you down the track. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.